the Tim Heale Thirsty Thursday live stream. From 7 until 9 weekly. Here's your host, Tim Heale.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Oh, hang on. I've got all sorts going on here. Let me shut things up. That's not that one. Oh, no. Thought I'd tested all of this.
Here's your host, Tim Heale.
Oh, I can only apologise. It's all going terribly wrong at this end. That's it. Well, welcome everybody to this Thursday live stream election special. Unfortunately, I've got to say I've had a few apologies from some of the candidates, but we do have a couple of candidates tonight that are going to join in and they're going to answer your questions as they come in. So without further ado, I'd just like to introduce first off the leader of the council, Graham Burgess. So Graham, welcome to the live stream.
Thank you, Tim.
So we've also got sat in the wings waiting to come in. We've got Stephen Philpotts, who's going to come into the live stream. Good evening, Graham. Stephen.
Good evening, Tim. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. Thank you very much for joining.
No problem.
Well, what's the plan for this evening is that I'll start off. I've got a few questions that I'd like to run through, a few things that I'd like to bring up for you guys to answer. Going to try and not have it as a party political broadcast, but it's questions that people have already asked me to ask you guys about the future of Gosport and how you've seen how it's been evolving recently, and should you be elected, your plans for going forward. So the first question that I'd like to ask is the remapping of the boundaries for the borough. How has that changed the way that the council is going to be run from now on? How's it going to look for the electorate? Are they going to see any difference into the way they're going to cast their vote? So, Graham?
Okay, well, the Boundary Commission undertook a review of Gosport Borough Council and looked at the number of councillors per ward and realised that they wanted to readjust it and reduce the number of wards from 17 down to 14. Leon the Solent is not affected because we have the largest numbers per ward, so we stay as is with 4 councillors in Leon Solent, and it means that there are then 24 councillors for the rest of Gosport. It means some wards have been merged. For example, Privet was split up and is now merged with Brockhurst. Leesland is merged with Christchurch. And there's a new ward, new name, Harbourside and Town, which is the old Town ward and a bit of Christchurch. So going down from 34 councillors down to 28 will also save the council over £40,000 a year in the sense of the council's remuneration plus officers' time for not attending meetings, etc. The actual effect of the council will still be the same. We will meet, we will debate, and we'll decide and carry Gosport forward. Thank you.
Excellent. So effectively, we're looking at 4 candidates in Leon Solent and then 2 candidates at all the other areas.
Correct. Leon Solent has 2 wards, Lee East and Lee West. So there's 2 in each ward. The same with every council. It's every ward. For example, Stephen is in Peel Common, and there'll be 2 councillors for Peel Common.
And as I understand it, the 2 candidates, the one that wins will stay on for 4 years, and the one that leaves or becomes second will then be up for re-election in 2 years' time.
That is correct. That is the standard way that elections are run.
Excellent. So, so going forward, then, how is the increase in council tax going to affect us? Because the Chancellor said that we've got something like £150 off our council tax bill. How's that affected the council?
Okay, two things. First of all, Gosport Borough Council kept council tax to a minimum, and for a Band D council house, it's the effect of 10 pence a week or £5 a year. Now, the most properties we have in Gosport are in Band B. We have nearly 14,000 of those. Their increase is just over £3 a year. So we've kept our council tax very, very low. I believe we are effective. And as far as the £150 back that the government has done, that is coming back through the government. And for those that pay their council tax by direct debit, they will get remuneration either later this month, the end of the month, or in May. We have actually paid over 1,000 residents so far, and we're busy working through. For those that don't pay by direct debit, it's a bit more awkward in the sense we have to verify who they are, get their details, etc., their bank accounts, because we do it via BACS, the Banking Automatic Clearance System.
All right. So that's a fairly positive then for the residents, maybe not for the council.
It has caused extra work, but the staff are working well and we're well on top of it.
Yeah. Is that going to make a difference to your budgets? Is it
No,
going to make
nothing
a difference?
at all to do with the budget.
Okay, so you don't actually get that money to spend as per se. Okay. So
there's a couple of other things just to tidy up on, Tim, just in case people are unaware if they're listening, and that is that because we're a two-tier area, we have two councils that run our services here in Gosport, whereas if anybody's watching from, say, Portsmouth or Southampton, that isn't the case. They're a unitary authority just with one council. Because we have two councils, they separate, the councils separate the services that they provide between one another. So services such as, say, for example, education, adult social care, and all issues relating to transport, roads, and so on, they're the big spending budgets, and they're dealt with through Hampshire County Council. The smaller stuff, which is the leisure services, environmental health, and other small, more local matters, housing, for instance, they're dealt with through Gosport Borough Council. And around 85%, roughly, of all the council tax that everyone pays in towns like Gosport goes to Hampshire County Council. And Gosport Borough Council only accounts for around 15%. And then, of course, on top of that, people will have their overall council tax bill, and they can look at their council tax bill and see that some of the money goes to the police and fire authority, some of it will go to say other services which are not necessarily run directly from the local authority.
Excellent. So it's quite a positive that for us that live on the peninsula in Gosport that we've got this two-tier system.
Well, it can be. I mean, it can be confusing sometimes for the electorate as to who their councillor is and what the lines of demarcation are. There's also another very important matter here, and it has been the case for some years, that council tax is restricted, or council tax increases are restricted by government, by legislation. So local authorities are only allowed to raise council tax by a particular amount. I believe is it 1.99% per year? Is it 2.99%, Graham? 1.99.
1.99, 2.99, I think it is.
2.99. If councils wanted to go any higher than that, if say for example Gosport Borough Council or even Hampshire County Council said no, we want to raise more money from council tax than that, then what we would need to do is go to a referendum, and we would be obliged to hold a referendum of all the residents of the town and ask them if it's okay to raise their council tax by more than the government ceiling. And as you can imagine, that's not a route that councils either want to go down or indeed have gone down. So they've been restricted in terms of how much they can raise the council tax.
Yeah, so when it comes to the roads and transport around around the area, I think we're fairly lucky in the fact that our roads are in quite a good state of repair. If you go to somewhere like, for instance, around the Caterham area and Warlingham, the roads there are horrendous with potholes and stuff like that. But I think part of the reason for that is that it's possibly underspending, but it's also possibly down to the fact that they get a lot colder conditions up there that cause the problems. And when they do repair the roads, it's fairly poorly done to start with.
Well, the pressure on budgets such as highways are across the country, and there's a couple of things I think that might be quite of interest to any listeners and on that subject, and that is that although budgets are very tight, one of the real problems we've got at the moment is inflation, and particularly inflation in the construction industry. And inflation in the construction industry is running at around twice as high, around 15%. And the actual retail price index. That means that every project that the county council, for example, need to undertake, whether that's repairs of road or whether that's building new roads, for instance, like the Stubbington bypass that people might know a bit about, and that sort of thing, the price of that actually goes up because the cost of the materials, the cost of the labour and so on are rising at the moment very, very steeply. And it's particularly difficult for all councils across Britain to get hold of the materials at the price at which they would like. So the money doesn't go quite as far as it did, and that is a major challenge for local authorities.
Yeah, I think we're going to come on to a little bit of that later.
Sure.
When we're looking at some of the other bits and pieces. So,
sorry, I dropped out there and I've just got back in.
That's all right, Graham. I was covering for you.
So we've got actually a candidate that hasn't been part of the council before. I do believe she's standing for Bridge Mary. So I'm just going to bring in Supriya.
Excellent.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. For you? Good, thank you.
So you're just about to start, or you've obviously started your campaign, but you're standing for Bridge Mary.
Bridge Mary, yes. Bridge Mary Ward, yeah.
Yes. Are you looking forward to it?
Oh, yes, I'm so looking forward to it because used to be Bridge Mary North and South, and they are now all together. And I have a shop in Bridge Mary that's called Vigilant Premier, and I talk to a lot of people on the till every day. So I'm very looking forward to the people who comes in my shop or the resident who I talk to with their concern to vote for me and get elected in New Bridge Mary Ward.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Wish you the very best of luck. So
Thank you.
We've been talking about council tax and the council's budget just recently, which is, I mean, it's going to be a massive thing coming up shortly.
Yes.
Because I understand that the council got a large budget to do the regeneration of the high street and the waterfront and the bus station. But the problem there is that, like Stephen was saying, the cost of materials is going up, which is then going to have an impact on what the government or what the council is going to be able to do if they can't time. I mean, how much they can actually put into that project. So, what's the contingency for that?
It might be more helpful if I try and help out on that, Tim,
please,
because that's okay. I think the first things first. I think it would be helpful for anyone listening or watching the podcast to see that there's a separation between a capital scheme and a revenue scheme. And that sounds very dry and rather boring, but it is actually extremely important differentiation, because the things you've mentioned there, like the renovation of the high street, the waterfront regeneration, bus station, and so on, these are capital projects. Now, one of the major changes there's been in the last 10, 12 years in local government has been the proliferation, if I can use that phrase, of grant opportunities that local authorities can bid for. So governments will, I think listeners may notice that from time to time they're listening to the radio or watching the TV, and they hear about a particular amount of money that is the government has announced as 2 billion or £2.5 billion, all these huge sums of money.
Yeah.
What happens is that budget, that project is announced by government, and it's up to local authorities, local councils, to bid for a share of that money. So what we've been doing in Gosport is we've been active in bidding for shares of money. So, for example, you mentioned the bus station site, very good example. We're very close now to securing the planning consent for the new bus terminal, which will be where the taxi rank is at the present time, at the end of the high street, end of Mumby Road. It's going to cost, at the present time, we reckon, around £5.9 million. But most of that money, £5.2 million of that, has come from a fund called the Transforming Cities Fund. That's government money, not local council's money. So that hasn't come from the pockets of council taxpayers in Gosport directly. That's come from the Exchequer. The same applies to some extent to the High Street. So we've got the High Street Heritage Action Zone, for instance. So Gosport was successful in being chosen as not only having a heritage action zone, which is the whole of the borough, but the High Street specifically in Stoke Road. And a lot of money has been poured into projects to revitalise the High Street. And we're only just beginning to see some of those come to fruition now. So government money and government pots are extremely important to local councils in terms of delivering for their local residents for major capital schemes.
Yeah. I'd just like to bring in Graham back, and we also got Lynn Hook that's going to join in. So, good evening, Lynn.
Tim, it's just a very quick pop in and say hello. Unfortunately, I have to go out tonight. I've got a prior appointment, but I'd just like to say hi, and I can listen in as far as I can go, but then I will have to leave very early. But lovely to see you.
You can always catch you up on catch up.
Lovely, thank you.
After the live stream finishes, it'll be ready to watch back. So
lovely, thank you.
And Lynn, as an ex-mayor, and her husband is, I believe, the outgoing mayor, who's standing down.
Yes, there's only a few more days to go. So,
yes.
Gosh, where's that year gone?
So it does flash by.
Indeed. We're all very busy people, and of course, time, as you say, just goes by so quickly.
Yes. So the next question that I've been asked to look at is the housing homeless and rough sleepers and legal migrants that are in and around the area. So if we can look at the housing policy, if somebody would like to pick up on that point. Perhaps Stephen wants to answer that one.
Well, no, I mean, I think I've spoken enough already. I'm quite happy to defer to the leader on that. And so the leader, I think, can take that. He probably knows a great deal more about the subject than I do anyway.
Graham, what's the housing policy at the moment for the borough? I think we've lost Graham.
If Graham can't hear, then I'll try and help out if I can. We had during the pandemic, like so many authorities across the country, a significant initiative, which was a government initiative of everybody in. I think people may have heard of that, but just for those who are not familiar with everybody in, it was an opportunity to take people who may have been sleeping rough off the streets and give them somewhere to live and somewhere to stay. in Gosport's case, we had a very innovative idea of putting pods, as we called them, on the South Street car park, and that provided temporary accommodation off the street for people who would otherwise have been very vulnerable in our society. So that was one thing. The second thing is, as far as our housing policy is concerned, it's probably better to, I think, if Graham can hear this, is to defer to him. He would know a lot more about our housing policy. But we have done quite a lot in recent years to deal with homelessness, and we have a very active homelessness policy. And we are also embarking as a local authority on building council properties. So our aim and ambition, and it's not so much an ambition, it's a very solid plan, is to build another 100 council homes over the next 2, 3, 4 years. It's the first council properties that have been built in Gosport for quite some time, and we will be able to give those houses to local people who really need them.
Yeah.
I don't know whether Supriya, actually, I'm going to invite Supriya to see if she wants to say anything there, because Supriya, I know, has done a huge amount of work, especially during the pandemic, to help people who are vulnerable in the community. Supriya, is that fair? Is that a fair comment?
Oh, yeah, it is fair. Pathways. So yeah, during pandemic, I tried and helped the people who are vulnerable and cooked the veg meals for them. I think is first lockdown. Yeah, people used to message us saying that the shop going to be shut down. We do not have anybody to shop for us or something like that. So my husband and I started helping them with free deliveries. Also, what I've decided, people will starve. So I started cooking food in Carisbrook Arms and used to deliver fresh veg food to each and every doorstep wherever I used to get message from every day. And people were very happy because around the shop area, if I talk about Witch Lane, most of the elderly people live and they do not have anybody to take care of them. So yeah, I say it's a very good, a huge success where I was in a position to serve people as well as working in the shop for more than 12 hours a day. So yeah, it was fun. I'm really happy that people still talk about my food at the time where they needed somebody to talk, somebody to feed them with love. So yeah, that's what I did, and yeah, it was huge success during that time pandemic.
So we'll take a very short, a quick message for anybody that's listening out there. If you want to join the conversation, just put a comment in the chat and we'll try and answer your questions. And if you could also click the like button and just to say we know you're out there. So we've covered the rough sleepers and homeless. What about legal migrants that are looking to come into this area? Graham's having difficulty, I think.
Is Graham actually able to hear us? That's the question. I'm looking at him there. I'm not sure he can hear us. He's speaking, but I can't hear him.
Yeah, I think his mic's muted. Hang on, see if I can unmute it from here. Oh, there you go.
I know. Well, I know that Graham was doing a lot of work actually at the level of the people from Afghanistan who were coming over. We were the first town actually, or the first borough in Hampshire to be able to house people from Afghanistan last August when during that crisis. And I believe we're also, and the leader will know a lot more about this than me. I believe we're also active in the issues relating to facilitating people at a county council level to help people who are coming through the Ukrainian crisis. So I don't know whether Graham is able to hear us or able to contribute to this. He may be able to tell us a bit more about that.
Looks like he's still having technical issues.
It looks like he is. Perhaps we'll give him some time and perhaps come back to him on that, because he would have more information on that than me, Tim.
Yeah. So another thing that we'd like to look at is the education and schooling policy that the council generally have, and anything that you're looking forward to as we move forward.
Well, education policy is largely governed from central government, and a lot of our schools are are not necessarily run by the local authority. They may be run through academy trusts or grant maintained and so on. So it's a fairly patchwork thing as far as the schools are concerned. However, the county council is the education authority, and the county council have a huge capital program of school building and school renovation. Probably the best example locally that I can point to for that is actually in Rowner School. You'll be able to see there Grange School, where this £8.7 million school building has just been completed, and as we speak now, the renovation of the multi-use games facility area and next to it is being constructed from where the old building used to stand. So it is important to have both an active education policy as well as a clear sort of view of capital as well. I'm not directly at county council level involved in the education. I don't sit on the education committee, but I do go to certain meetings to discuss the issues relating to educational attainment and the Ofsted reports that go into schools. I would like to encourage people in the community to be actively engaged in their local school if they can, and to become, say, for example, school governors. If they can, then that's a huge help for not just the county council in terms of delivering the policies for education and delivering education to children, but also for the school itself to have so many outreach projects and community projects as well. So I can probably answer specific questions, but more generally, that's about the best I can do, I think, for you. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. It's at least there's a plan that we're looking at going forward with, and I think it's important to understand that it is the county council that are in charge of the particularly schools, and encouraging, I guess, teachers to stay in school. And I know Bay House School, I know some children that go there. That's been fairly disruptive in the last couple of months because of, I guess, people getting COVID and self-isolating still. And although the government has taken away all restrictions, people are still following what they had before. But that's life.
Just to point out, none of the secondary schools in Gosport are run by the Education Authority. They're all run by academy trusts, and although some of those schools do buy services from Hampshire County Council Education Authority, they're mainly run by their governing bodies and the trusts.
That's interesting. I know that. I know the Bay House School is really good, a really good school, and they score quite high on the league tables when it comes to schools.
Yes, they're part of what's called the Fareham and Gosport Multi Academy Trust, which incorporates a number of schools, but in particular in Gosport, it's Gomer Junior School, I think, and Bay House are part of the same Multi Academy Trust.
Yeah. Okay. So, are there any heritage plans for Gosport? We know that we've got lots and lots of historic buildings in Gosport, and I know that the old police barracks at HMS Hornet, that's being renovated. They've now fixed a roof on the old police barracks, and there's plans afoot to get the insides all refurbished fairly soon. And hi Tim and everybody. Good evening, Lena. So, are there any plans afoot for any of the other historic buildings that around our area that particularly the council are helping or encouraging or giving permission to be refurbished, to be brought back into use?
Well, actually, yeah, there are, and this is actually quite a wide-ranging subject. A few years ago, not that many years ago, about just before the pandemic, the Royal Society of the Arts was running had a league table across England and Wales, looking at the towns and areas, locations, and communities that had the highest number of heritage assets. And they looked at it in a whole variety of ways, not just the buildings, but in terms of also the participation from the community and so on. And Gosport was actually 7th in the country, and consistently 7th in the country, above places like Cambridge and Oxford, believe it or not, certainly above Portsmouth. And there were only 6 authorities ahead of us, 3 of those in London. But so it's an extraordinary richness of heritage assets that there are in the borough. But the problem, unfortunately, has been most of those heritage assets have been held by the Ministry of Defence over a long period of time. And I'm sorry to say, and I don't want to be disparaging to the Ministry of Defence, they haven't necessarily been the most responsible custodians of our heritage over the period. And some of those assets, I'm afraid, have fallen into significant disrepair. I mentioned earlier on about the bid for money. Well, there's something that I think almost everybody would have heard of, and that's the Levelling Up Fund. The Levelling Up Fund is a £2.6 billion fund of central government, and each local authority is allowed to bid for it. We had a bid put in. We put in a bid last October, but we weren't successful. So the second round has just been published in March, and we're preparing our bid now with a deadline of, I believe, the end of June or beginning of July for the next round. And it's up to £20 million of money that we can bid for. Now, clearly, we have quite a shopping list in terms of our heritage assets in Gosport. So we're looking at buildings that are listed, or ancient monuments and so on, that we believe are candidates for bringing back into use. We've got to shortlist those, and we've got to have clear plans for those. But it's important from our point of view that we do everything we possibly can to lever in the kinds of money that's necessary, and we're talking of very large sums to make those heritage assets fit for the next generation and the generation after that, because they're falling, unfortunately, too many of them into disrepair.
Yeah, so I know a little bit about the police barracks, and that's costing it's well over about £1.5 million to bring back into use.
Absolutely.
But there are plans to do that, and it's happening as we speak. So
well,
that's one building that's going back into use.
People may be familiar at say, for instance, at Pretty Hard, for instance, where the buildings there, where you've got the museum, the explosion museum, you've also got the brewery that's just opened as well alongside it. All of those things are in buildings which were in the ownership of the MOD, which had come to the end of their life and use as far as the MOD were concerned, and that we had to repurpose and find other uses for. So the private sector can play a part in that. Another really good example, prominent example that you might be familiar with, is Number 2 Battery at Stokes Bay, for instance, which is at the western end of Stokes Bay. And Number 2 Battery was in a dilapidated condition, but the Gosport's Diving Museum has gone into that building, and they've bid for significant amounts of funds to basically just get out all the moisture from the building and from the inside the building, and make it fit for the exhibits that they have in there. And they have a lot of really exciting exhibits. They've just recently been awarded an additional, I believe, £100,000, which means that they can now extend the museum within the building even further to make and have even more artifacts on display. So the idea, really, I think, is preservation by usage. That is probably the key message. If you have a building which is falling into disrepair, which is no longer purposed for its original use. The things that you've just mentioned as well, the police building you just mentioned at Hornet, the number 2 battery, and also the Explosion Museum at Pretty's Hard. All of those are examples of bringing heritage buildings back into use.
So I had the opportunity the other day to have a chat with the manager of the Powder Monkey, and they gave us a tour of the brewery itself, how they've gone about repurposing that building for a brewery, that they've kept the feeling of the powder store itself in 2 buildings, one for the brewery side where they've got all the equipment, and then for the other side they've used all the original woodwork in there and done a fantastic job. And then across the road in the Explosive Museum itself, they've got the bar area that they've repurposed, and they've done a terrific job in there, and they're serving up some really fine ales.
They certainly are. I've been in there too. I think the other thing's worth mentioning, because it's not just confined to there. I mean, we've got, for example, the Gosport Museum in the High Street, which is currently undergoing a £1.7 million renovation. Much of that money is coming through an organisation called Hampshire Cultural Trust. But the contribution is also coming from what I previously mentioned before, the High Street Heritage Action Zone Fund. So a lot of money is being injected and invested into these buildings to give them a real purpose. So whether it's a museum, whether it's a brewery, or whether it's, say, running a business, we have businesses that are interested. For example, in Fort Rowner, they want to run a artificial intelligence robotics company from there. They believe that's an ideal place to do that. So the government are working with the local council, and we're trying to explore ways in which we can put funding into that building to make that work too.
Yeah. So just a message there that we had permission to use a site office in the Explosive Museum for a Falklands conflict display, and some talks in the Powder Monkey by veterans. So
brilliant.
Again, that's starting to get in amongst it as well, which is really good news.
Yeah.
So the High Street, do the council take care of the budget for not the council tax, but the commercial tax?
What, the business rate? The business rate.
Yeah.
Well, business rate's not set by the local council. Business rates are set by the Valuation Office, which is a central government organisation, and business rate is a very controversial area for businesses, of course, because it's an antiquated, and I would say some would argue, and I think there's some justification, an outdated system of taxation. It raises an awful lot of money. It raises well over £20,000 million a year for the Exchequer. And a lot of that money does go into local councils, it's true, but not all of it by any means. The problem, unfortunately, is because local councils have no way of setting business rate, and they don't spend all of the money, and also because high streets are under extraordinary strain, as is the retail sector, not only from the pandemic that we know about, but also prior to that from competition from online businesses and so on. The habits and working patterns of the population are changing, and I think what needs to happen is any government of the day needs to be more agile in the way in which it looks, and is more flexible in its way in which it looks at raising money from businesses. So it is, I think, on a general principle, not acceptable for a company that, say, for example, delivers door to door and runs from huge warehouses somewhere off a motorway interchange to pay very, very little in terms of tax and business rate, where a small corner shop would be paying significant amounts of their take in business rate. So something needs to be done about that, but that's something which is above my pay grade. Actually, it's something that Supriya might want to say something about, because I've spoken about that, but I'm looking at Supriya, and I know that she has first-hand experience of that, running a business herself. So she
Yeah.
may want to say something about business rate.
Mm.
Would you?
Yeah, sure. I would like to appreciate first the council rate rebate has been given to the businesses like me, like I have family run business, and I have been given rate relief, which is really, really nice for last 2 years. And I just applied for this year as well. So which is uh, I'm saving more than 10 or 12,000 in just a year because of the COVID hit hard to the businesses. And I'm really happy that I've received that rate relief. And the other fellow business, which I have, one of my friend who is he's having post office in High Street. So he's very happy about it. He always talks to me. He said it's really, really nice that a family like us has been given rate relief in last 2 years to run a business successfully, because even they were shutting down is kind of a situation. But yeah, everything is normal now, and we still have 1 year to go for a rate relief. So I'm really happy at having a business and running a family business and saving that money at least for last 2 years. Yeah.
Mm.
It makes a lot of difference. I think it gave me exposure to I can invest some money into some other stuff into the business, or I can upgrade my shop with that money. So yeah, it means a lot to me for the rate relief of 2022 and 2023 and last year as well, and the business grants as well, so which is really, really nice. And I would like to say thank you to the government and the local community, a local council to that. Thank you.
Mm. So I mean that's a good. I mean this last couple of years has really hit everybody. Really, I mean particularly small businesses that weren't in the industry of supplying foodstuffs, where they were forced to close during that, particularly the first lockdown.
Yes, right.
And yeah, they were still having to pay their business rates. They were still having to pay their rent on the properties and stuff like that. So, and those businesses, you just walk up and down the high street and you can see that lots and lots of places have shut down.
Yes, right. Just because of our business is like serving food, and even we were struggling those days. Even we were not having enough milk, bread, but we managed to have it because we need to go early in the morning to the supplier at their wholesaler place, and then wait in the queue even 3-4 hours to just get the essential. But we managed to do that as we are family members and we go here and there. So like we were managing things, and people were really happy that we were still open that time during the lockdown time. We didn't shut for any even single day, which was appreciated by the community. So that was a huge spirit. I was to believe I had that kind idea of my mind that I need to start opening, that I'm not shutting down the shop even just for a single day. Doesn't if I don't have enough milk and bread, I've got other stuff which I can manage for a day or two, and then I will work hard and go in the morning to the wholesale outlet and bring some more stuff in. So yeah, it was really hard for retail as well. It was really hard for the other businesses during lockdown. They even shut down just because of they were not about to open, like restaurant and some other businesses, or even working from home was not easy for most of the people because they were having children and they were getting infected. So yeah, a lot of problems during lockdown.
Just know there's another question that's popped in about usage, I think. Is it possible to have pop-up shops use vacant high street shops over the short period?
It certainly is. In fact, there already is one. There's a pop-up shop in there's a pop-up shop in the high street where the aforementioned Hampshire Cultural Trust are operating from. They were going to operate with the Makers Guild. The idea was that the Makers Guild are a Portsmouth-based organisation who, or is it Makers Guild? I think they're part of the Makers Guild, the Maker Place or somebody like that. What they were going to do was have craft exhibits and all things that people could buy. the idea was that before Christmas they were going to move into the former post office, WH Smith, if you like, 5152 High Street. They moved in, they only opened for about 3 days, and the roof was leaking. So they had to come out of there, and they've moved in now to the former Leaders estate agents or whatever place over on the other side of the high street. So they're there at the present time. They're open, I think, at least 4 days a week. And it's a great place. You can buy lots of local products in there as well, produce from jams and pickles and marmalades and stuff, and also some bits of craft that people have made. That pop-up is there for the time being anyway, until at such time as the museum reopens after its renovation, which is going to take quite a few months yet. But the idea of pop-ups in the high street is something that was part of our levelling up fund bid. We had 2 or 3 targets, if you like, of buildings within the high street that we wanted to repurpose and use for community use. But unfortunately, on this occasion, we weren't fortunate enough to secure the money that we needed as a council to get hold of those premises. And of course, we have to drive a very hard bargain with the people who own these buildings, because I think it's a misunderstanding sometimes, but these buildings are privately owned, and the landlords charge a significant rent for these buildings. And we have to try to be negotiating with them that if we're going to use a building for community use, commercial rents are unrealistic for a local authority to sustain, particularly as we consider the money comes out of the public purse. So we have to be responsible. But the answer to the question, is it possible to have pop-up shops in the high street? Yes, it is. We do have one. We'd like more. And I'm sure if successful in our bids through the High Street Heritage Action Zone, we will have more.
So there's one I popped into the other day, C2U, run by a guy called Gary Walker, and Lizzie was in there supporting it, and there were some veterans came in, and they looked very hungry, so they gave them some food. So they are distributing food to the needy guys and people that are or were homeless but are still struggling.
I saw the pictures in Facebook. I haven't been in yet, but I've seen the pictures in Facebook.
I'll probably pop back down there tomorrow.
It's a really good cause, I would believe, because serving veterans and the rough sleepers and people who don't have home, at least they should have food and coffee or any chit chat. They want somebody to talk. It's a really good cause. I've seen the picture. I've not been there, but yes, soon there.
So I should probably pop back in there tomorrow at some stage. And so the regeneration of the high street is, I think it's important. It's quite a lively high street. If you walk down it, I mean, I think having the Premier Inn there is quite a good thing, because that brings people in, and then you've got the Witherspoons, and that is always busy, and lots of the cheap shops are down there, and there's lots of people coming backwards and forwards between Morrison's and the ferry. So we've got another question here.
I've just read that, Tim, from Lana. I think that's an extremely good question, an extremely good point that she's raised there. I'm gonna mention Heritage Open Days. Heritage Open Days are now a national thing, and they started right here in Gosport. We were the ones who kicked off Heritage Open Days, and in Gosport we have more events going on during our Heritage Open Days fortnight every September than almost anywhere else in the country. It's really quite extraordinary. We have 80, 90, that kind of number of events. They may be talks that take place. They may be tours, walking tours. They can be places like Fort Brockhurst opening their doors to visitors. The museums, whether it's the Submarine Museum or the Explosion Museum, or whether it's the Hovercraft Museum in Leon-Solent, or the Diving Museum in Stokes Bay, or the 17th Century Museum in Rowner, in Grange, all of those things, all of those places are run. Almost all of those places, I say, not all of them, almost all of those are run, as Lana has pointed out, by volunteers. And it's the volunteers are the absolute backbone of our community. And we're so fortunate to have so many people who are prepared to volunteer to do these things and to run these things. And some of them, I guess a lot of residents wouldn't even know they were run by volunteers, because the whole operation is so professional, and the people there are so dedicated. But Heritage Open Days is a really, really great opportunity for anybody to get out and about in Gosport and try. And when as soon as the Tourist Information Office publish the agenda, the program, I would recommend people get their bids in as quickly as possible, because these things become oversubscribed, and it's absolutely fascinating.
There's also another group, the Portsmouth and Gosport History Group.
Yes, there is.
Have events going on the first week of August that are looking behind the scenes of some various places between Gosport and Portsmouth as well. So keep an eye out for that coming up.
Absolutely. Sounds great, actually. And in fact, this extends beautifully from August straight through into September for the previously mentioned Heritage Open Days. The opportunity for if you like, being a tourist in your own town. That was the original tagline, and it still works. It still works today.
Which is brilliant. I mean, just walking around, just Gosport itself, it's reeking with history, absolutely reeking in history, and for small groups to learn about that history is phenomenal, and it just keeps this area alive, I think. So it's important that we keep, as custodians of our heritage, going. And I mean, it's with the government and the council's help to keep this heritage alive, to keep these sites in use is fantastic. And I think working in partnership with the local council to bring these sites back into life is pretty awesome. So I'd like to move on a little bit and look at we just had to say goodbye to Graham, obviously, a little bit earlier, and Lynn, because I know they had somewhere else to go, and Sabrina as well. She's had to cut away. She said that she'd only be able to join in for a little bit. So hopefully, Stephen, you'll be able to stick in.
You've got me for as long as you need me, Tim.
Oh, fantastic!
It's a shame. It's a great shame, really, that you didn't get a greater number of participants, but because otherwise people just have to sit and listen to me, which is dreadful, really.
Well, and me. I did email every single council member and candidate that's standing, and there were quite a few that came back to me and said that unfortunately they've got other things on this. I know there's an AGM going on this evening for a lot of the Conservatives in the area.
I wasn't aware of that.
Well, I don't think it's Conservatives per se. It's groups that they're on.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. What was the other? And I think it was one of the Liberals were out canvassing this evening. So, but they did have the invite. But it's important that we do this, and I'd like to go on after the elections with a bit of luck on the 12th, invite some of the newly elected councillors on to have a chat, to give their vision for what they want to bring to the party. So the environment and climate policy, how much do you know about that?
Well, the the thing about the local councils is we subdivide things amongst different people on the council. So the climate change expert, if you like, on Gosport Borough Council is Councillor Zoe Huggins. So she knows more about this than I do. I am aware that that we do have a commitment to net zero as a local authority, and so too do Hampshire County Council. And many of the policies dovetail into that. So what happens at councils like Gosport Borough Council or Hampshire County Council, and of course it's typical of councils across the country, is that there is an element to everything that we do which is concentrates on its impact on the environment and its impact on climate change. Now, there's many facets to it. Residents in Gosport only need to go for a stroll around their local community, and within a few moments you'll see brand new trees have been planted. They are literally everywhere. Thousands of trees have been planted across the borough in recent months. Just in the last year, 2 years, say, there's thousands and thousands of new trees. But it's not just about planting trees. We're also wilding areas of land across the borough. So what residents will see this summer is the most extraordinary areas across the borough of displays of colour with wildflowers and so on. So that is going to be something that people will really, really notice and will catch the eye. But it's when you're in a borough like this one. I mean, we're 25 square kilometre peninsula with 82,000 people, 72% built on. So it's actually quite difficult when you've got that level of dense population. But where we do have the opportunity in places like the Alva Valley, places like Stokes Bay, and so on, we will take those opportunities to maximise the amount of improvements that we can do to the environment. And of course, we make sure that as a local authority, we do things as clean and green as we possibly can. And that means that our fleet of vehicles, for example, we're moving over to battery powered vehicles in all of the vehicles that we run. We're also very keen on anything that reduces emissions. So we want to encourage cycling and active travel. So the idea is that every project that comes forward, capital project that comes forward, active travel is front and center of our thinking in terms of how pedestrians, cyclists, and if relevant, bus users, for instance, people other than people in private cars can access those things. On top of that, of course, we have an obligation at the county level to provide electric power points for vehicles, for electric vehicles, and vehicle charging points. And there will be a huge initiative coming forward following government's recent consultation on electric vehicle charging points, and the government are injecting significant sums of money, and local authorities will need to find those places where they can put those points. So I think we'll see over the next 3 to 5 years, I think even, and in some cases sooner than that, I think people will start to see some significant environmental improvements, things that they can actually see in their own community.
Yeah, we're already seeing that. I mean, if you just drive from up round the road across the roundabout on Newgate Lane and then on to Stubbington, you can see the cycle path that they put in, or they continued on because it was there already. But it looks like they've pretty much improved it with the bypass coming in through there, and I think with all the traffic that uses the A32, and if anything that's going west uses the bypass, Stubbington bypass, I think it might ease up the amount of traffic that goes up Newgate Lane and into the A32.
Well, I certainly hope so, and I think it's a little known fact, Tim, that Gosport has one of the highest per capita cycle participants anywhere in the country. In fact, we're last time I looked, I believe we were 7th, I think, or 7th or 8th, something very, very significant like that in the country. and miles higher in Hampshire than any other local authority in Hampshire. I mean, we are obviously the geography of Gosport. It has a lot to contribute to that. We're very flat, and of course it's not too difficult to get on a bicycle from one place to the next. And of course we have the network of former railway lines which have long since gone, and those railway lines were closed pre-beaching. So they were closed back in the 1950s. In 1953, the last passenger train unfortunately ran out of Gosport, and those now
so we can't blame beaching for it then.
Can't even blame beaching for that. No, even and even though in my advanced years it was even before I was born, so you can't blame the existing local councillors either. But the fact of the matter is that they're cycleways now, and they're extremely well used, and it's a massively easy and safe way for many people to get around town. So to a very great extent, Gosport's a leader in active travel. We are showing the way for many places across the country as to how it can be done.
Absolutely. I mean, I struggle at cycling myself, but I certainly go around on two wheels on the motorbike. And
no, I cycle. I cycled today. I cycle. When it comes to this time of year, I'm a bit of a fair weather cyclist at my age, but I cycle most of the time. And it is actually takes me. I live up in Pill Common, and it takes me probably no longer to get to the town centre by bike than it does by car, and that's no exaggeration. By the time I've faffed around getting in the car and sitting in traffic queues and finding somewhere to park, etc., I can be on my bicycle and down the cycle lane, the bus lane. The former railway line. And be in the town centre in next to no time. So it really is that convenient. And anybody who's not been, and of course it's very good for your health as well, quite frankly. And I think we need our population, especially our younger people, to be active. And I would try everything I possibly could to encourage them to do that. And we know that young people are much more climate conscious too. So they have they have a very real motive for engaging.
They have a vested interest.
Indeed. Yeah.
Absolutely. Looks like I've got another question here.
Okay.
Let me just pull that one up. So Gosport tourist point down by the ferry is always very quiet. And a lot of people aren't aware it's there. Imagine. Finding upgrade their shops and I think the funding of upgrading shops doesn't really come under the council's remit.
Well,
but they certainly
the Tourist Information Office is funded. The Tourist Information Office is funded by the council, and I'm proud to say that we are one of, I think, only 3 local authorities in Hampshire that now have retained our Tourist Information Office. Tourist Information Offices have closed all over the country, and we've retained ours. The Tourist Information Office actually has a multi-function, really. Not only does it act as a little shop, and actually you can get bits and pieces in the Tourist Information Office. If I had them to hand, I'd show you some of the stuff that I bought, from everything from tea towels through to coasters. You can get little bits and pieces in the Tourist Information Office as a shop, but you can get maps, you can get guidance to all manner of places around, not just in Gosport but elsewhere. And the staff in there are extremely friendly and very knowledgeable. Of course, it's stuck in the old bus station site. Our aim, of course, is to redevelop the bus station site, and we want to do that fairly soon. And when we do, we will be keeping our Tourist Information Centre, and we will be enhancing the Tourist Information Office, and we will be looking to enhance our offer for people visiting the town. But I don't agree with Lana on that. The Tourist Information Office is well used, and it's a valuable facility.
I guess particularly for people coming into the area and visitors, I mean,
Well, just try to get into the Tourist Information Office during Heritage Open Days, for instance, or the run up to Heritage Open Days.
yeah,
So join, form an orderly queue is what I would say to people. It is a busy place. It's a busy place.
yeah. And I think, how much of an impact is the refurbishment or regeneration of the bus station and the waterfront going to impact while it's going on, and any idea when it's going to start?
Well, what a great question. Well, we haven't been able to do anything about the existing bus station site because we needed to make sure that we had enough money to provide an alternative. So we've been waiting for the opportunity, and it's not. And as you were mentioning yourself, I think Tim earlier on about the amount of money it costs to do what was down. They're doing at Hornet, for instance. But £5.9 million is not an insignificant sum of money, and that's how much the new bus terminus is going to cost, where the taxi rank is. Once we've got the planning consent in place for that bus terminus and work can start on that, we can then turn our attention to doing something more permanent and much more improved on the existing bus station site. The bus station was built in 1972. It's got something like 11 bays for buses. It doesn't need that many. It's miles too big. The footprint of the whole area is something like 0.88 hectares, and the developable part of that is about 0.6, just over 0.6 hectares. So it's not an insignificant size site. However, we are aware as a council that we want to put some very, very important things on that site. We need to have a ticket office for the ferry, for example. We want to have a tourist information office on that site if we can. We need to have somewhere for people to park their bicycles if they're using the ferry. That's really important for our active travel program. We need to have taxi rank. We need to have a pick up and drop off point for people, which is convenient. So there's a lot of things that we need to put onto that site, but in order to make it work, it means that we have to work, I'm afraid, with partners. The council hasn't got enough money to develop that site. The figure I saw that would cost to develop that site, to act from clearance to completion, could be anything in the region of £58 million, which is a huge sum of money. So whoever puts that kind of money in wants to see a return on their investment. And to get a return on their investment, we're talking about commercial stuff on there. So we're talking about possibly bars. We're talking about restaurants. We're talking about maybe even a hotel if it's viable, and probably some residential on there. But we've got to be really, really careful, because otherwise we're tempting to put a quart into a pint pot. And what we end up with has to be something that looks much, much better than the existing building, and that the public are going to be proud of, and they'll look at it and say, yes, I really like that. It's an iconic building. It fits with our waterfront. It looks great, and we can most importantly, the public can get access to. It is it's not easy, but we are actively talking to developers about very advanced plans as to what we can do with that site. But the reason we haven't moved up until now is because we had to lever in the money, or get in the money first, in order to do something about the bus station, because you can't just demolish a bus station and not do anything to replace it.
Absolutely. I mean, the demolition work in itself is likely to cost a few bob.
Yes, and actually, funny you say that. We've been given some money by government again. I was mentioned the funds before. We've been given a sum of money for that site specifically of £1.35 million through what's called the brownfield. I think it's called. Is it something like? It's either the brownfield redevelopment projects, or it's or something of that sort. But the brownfield money, £1.35 million, is specifically for that site. That means that contamination on these sites, and when I say contamination, I mean you've had buses there for 50 years, so that's the diesel and the oil and so on that seeped into the concrete and everything else. So anyone who wants to develop that site has to remove all of that muck, if you like, before they can do anything with it. And that costs a lot of money. Now, we've been given 1.35 million to use for that. We've also got other funds that we might be able to use. The aforementioned Levelling Up Fund, part of the bid, we want to see if we can dovetail that into the bus station site because it's a prime site and prime location. Also, we may be able, although it's early days yet, it's only recently been announced, to see whether we can use some of the money that the council's just been awarded from the UK Prosperity Fund, which is another £1 million that Gosport's been awarded. These sums sound like huge sums of money, don't they? But they really don't go very far. It might sound crazy to say that when I'm talking of millions of pounds, but when it costs £58 million just to renovate or to completely rebuild the bus station site, then you can see that sums like 1.3 million or £1 million are actually only quite a small portion of that overall amount. So we need commercial operators to come in as well. The private sector need to play their part too.
Yeah. And obviously they're going to want to bring in employment opportunities, particularly once during the regeneration of it. I mean, your builders and all the rest of it. And if they can employ local people to do that work, that would be fantastic. And then once they've generated or built a new infrastructure, and then they need people to local people to come and work there. Likewise with the regeneration of Daedalus as an enterprise zone, encouraging firms in that will employ locals to keep locals on the peninsula rather than having to leave the peninsula every day to go out to work. That would be a really good thing. And the more people they can employ locally, the less people are going to be leaving and coming back in the evening, aren't they? So that's another good thing. That cuts down the amount of traffic.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head, really, because one of the biggest challenges we face and have been facing for literally decades is our peninsula location. I mentioned about the railway station earlier on, the railway line earlier on, that the passenger transport on railways finished in 1953. We are the largest town by population anywhere in Great Britain without a railway station. We're a peninsula location. I mentioned that we've got 82,000 people living on 25 square kilometres and we're 72% built, and I mentioned that before. What I didn't say, and what you've just raised there, Tim, really valid point, is about the job situation. Our job density ratio stands at 0.53. In other words, we've got approximately half a job for everybody who wants one in Gosport. That means we have, in round numbers, we have 38,000 working people here in Gosport, but we only have on the peninsula around 19,000 jobs. So as a result, we have huge out commuting. Now, a lot of that goes on currently on 1A road, and that the A32. And that A road is in the top 23 most polluted and the top 10 most dangerous anywhere in the country. So we've got huge headwinds and difficulties here. We need to maximize our employment opportunities. The bus station site's one such. You're quite right to highlight Daedalus, absolutely spot on to highlight Daedalus. But there's a lot of other places within the borough that are coming up or may come up as surplus. For example, Blockhouse is liable. Some of it is liable to come over to be released as surplus very soon, probably in the next year, 18 months. And we need to be aware of how we're going to utilize that and what we're going to do with that, because whatever we do on that, we need to make sure that the infrastructure is in place to deal with it. I'll give you an example. Take the Heale Peninsula, for instance. Yeah. On the Heale Peninsula, we have the former Heale Hospital site, which has got some building has taken place. Some work has been done. Nothing like the amount that we had hoped when it was taken over by a company called Our Enterprise way back in 2009. But they face their own challenges and headwinds. but they want to develop that not only for housing but for jobs. Then you've got the adjacent Ministry of Justice buildings, which is the former Hasler Barracks, if you will, which was the immigration removal centre.
Yeah.
We still at this stage do not know what is going to happen to that. The Ministry of Justice said that it was going to be surplus to their requirement. They've now instigated a review, and they're currently looking at that to see whether or not they want to retain it for as part of the suite of their prison portfolio. But if it is released, and the intention was to release it, then there will be some housing on that site. Then you've got the blockhouse, which I mentioned before. Blockhouse divides into blockhouse 1, 2, and 3. The MOD have said variously what they intend to release, but almost certainly they're going to release blockhouse 1. Blockhouse 1 offers opportunities for employment because it's only one of 2 places within the harbour where deep water access is available, and marine businesses are desperate for deep water access, and they can utilise that for commercial reasons and create jobs, as well as probably some more housing on that site. So you could have more jobs, more homes, more activity on the Hasler Peninsula. But unfortunately, it's linked to the Gosport town centre via a one-way bridge. And that bridge is going to come under enormous strain. So we need to know what we can get in terms of help as a local authority in upgrading the infrastructure to ensure that if we are going to maximise employment opportunities and other opportunities on the Hasler Peninsula, for instance, we need to make sure that people can get on and off the Hasler Peninsula, because if they can't get on and off, then the investment's not going to come in. So, it's a chicken and egg situation. We know what we have to do. Without trying to go on too long, but it is an important and huge subject. If one looks at all the developable sites, if there is such a word, across Gosport, and you add them all together, whether they're Priddishard, Royal Clarence Yard, Blockhouse, Hasler, Daedalus, Salton even to some extent, and even the bus station site, all of these sites have something in common, or a number of things in common. To a varying degree, they have listed buildings, ancient monuments, contamination problems because of years, decades, sometimes even centuries of chemicals and diesel and so on. Then they have access problems. They also have lack of services in terms of water and electricity. And in the case of some of them, particularly looking at Blockhouse and Hasler, anyone familiar with that area will know that there's a flooding challenge as well. And with climate change and potentially rising sea levels, millions, tens of millions will have to be spent on flood defences in that area. So the challenges are vast and really, really large. We do not have, other places in the country may have them, we do not have greenfield sites that we can develop for housing or for jobs. We don't have that luxury. We only have brownfield sites, former developed sites, and each one of those has a challenge and a huge price tag. So I'm sorry to go on a bit there, but I thought I'd just set that out because I think it's an important part of the discussion when talking about Gosport's future.
I mean, that is a very important aspect to it all. And there's one place you didn't mention, which is Browndown, the old Browndown camp. I know it's I think it, if I understand rightly, it's in private hands at the moment.
It is.
Which is a little business that go around paintballing at the weekends, which is, I mean, I'll tell you a little story about Browndown camp. When I was a mere young lad, it was my first Army Cadet camp ever. Way back in 1971, I came down to Browndown, and it was a battle camp, and it has been that for donkey's years until they sold it off a while back. But that's another prime little location that could be redeveloped into possibly housing. Would be a good place
Well, we don't want housing there actually as a council. Our aim really for that area is, and we've always identified it in what's called in the jargon in the local plan, built leisure. The difficulty for the Brown Down camp and the person who owns it, I think, is that he has always wanted some form of access to the beach and some form of access to the sea. But unfortunately for him, the ownership of the beach is in the MOD's hands, and they still use the beach for war games and so on and so forth.
Landings and all the rest of it. You see them there all the time.
Amphibious landings. Yeah, absolutely. And so the Ministry of Defence are highly reluctant, is my understanding, to release that beach anytime soon. And that means that the Brown Down camp is somewhat landlocked. But built leisure could work, but it's not for me to say what the owner of that land should or could use it for. He's got to examine the potential that he would see for that site, and whether it's an extension, for example, of the caravan park at Kingfisher or something like that. It's difficult for me to actually say. It's a commercial decision, and it, as you say, privately owned.
Yeah, I know some years ago they used it as a TV program site for Lads Army, which worked quite well, taking young lads back to the 1950s and putting them through what was national service training, which was quite a good program at the time.
I do remember it. Yeah, I do remember it. Yeah. My late father always told me about his 2 years in the RAF and the square bashing and everything else. Something I managed to miss in my youth, thank goodness. I noticed that James was asking another question, and he said, "Can the council prioritise jobs over housing on these sites?" I absolutely agree with that. We do want to prioritise jobs over housing. Hardly a day goes by when we say this. One of the problems we've got is that central government are under pressure, because everyone in the country will know that houses are extremely expensive, whether you're renting or buying. And as a result of that, the feeling in central government is that there aren't enough houses, and there aren't enough houses being built. So they want more houses built. Now, central government take the view that local councils should build more houses, or should facilitate the building of more houses. And every council in the country is given a number of houses that it's told that it needs to aim to build over a period of time. Now, it may come as an enormous shock to the residents in Gosport to know that the government's assessment over the next 16 years to 2038, the government believe that Gosport should build an additional 5,500 houses in Gosport. Now, that is actually not possible. It can't be done. Even if we go upwards, and we have already gone upwards, we've already got a number of towers: Harbour Tower, Seaward Tower, Blake and Hammond Court, and so on and so on. We've got a Garland Court. We've already gone upwards to some extent. There's a limit to how much more we can go upwards without the public transport infrastructure and the employment infrastructure that the city would have. We don't have any of that. We're a commuter town, of course, as I mentioned before. So the question is, what do we do about that if we can't meet the number of houses the government say or flats that the government say we need to build? We're lobbying government, and we're getting some traction, and our MP is being very helpful on that, to say that we really feel that number is unrealistic. And as James says in his question, the priority for Gosport is not housing, it is jobs. Because if we just put more housing on those diminishing and valuable and tiny, let's face it, footprint brownfield sites, rather than going for jobs, then all we'll do is create more out commuting on congested roads. That's all will happen. More people will be needing to find work outside of the borough, and that will mean bad news for our neighbours in Fareham, for instance. Our roads will be more congested, and so will theirs. So it's not in any. Absolutely. So this is a sub-regional problem, not a Gosport problem. It's at least a sub-regional problem. So therefore, we need a sub-regional answer. And the sub-regional answer is through an organisation called the Partnership for South Hampshire, which is all the local authorities across South Hampshire joined together in a joint committee, and they thrash out and discuss how they're going to make use of limited open space, of transport opportunities, of investment in infrastructure opportunities, and where the housing is going to go. And that is a very important committee. It's one that the public probably have very, very little knowledge of, but it does a heck of a lot of work behind the scenes. And that work is the sub-regional work, which addresses the question essentially that James was asking. But the bottom line is, do I agree with what James says? Yes, I do. Priority jobs.
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying earlier, there's only 19,000 jobs for 82,000 people. So
well, 32,000 working people,
Yeah.
so to speak. I mean, that's
Yeah.
right.
So I mean, only jobs for half of them. So half of them have got to leave one way or another. I mean, the Gosport ferry takes a huge traffic of people crossing to Portsmouth every day and back again. And I guess that is good for that business. And I guess eventually they'll have to replace the ferries in some way, because that's obviously going to need refurbishing at some stage. I mean, if you go across on the ferry, you can see that although it's reasonable state of repair at the moment, when it's in constant use like it is, sooner or later it's going to need downtime for repairs. I mean, we've only got the two ferries, and they run one most of the time. So, yeah, that's the.
Well, one of the anomalies, and I've spoken to the chief executive of the ferry company, and I completely sympathise with them. One of the anomalies in terms of public transport in this country is that if you're running buses, there are subsidies available for bus companies to run their services. Okay, those have diminished over a period, but there's still subsidies available. If you're running a rail network, there's subsidies, government subsidies available over and above the fares that are taken. But if you run ferries, there are no subsidies. Ferries are the only form of public transport that have no availability of any kind of public subsidy. They have to pay for themselves. And so this is an absolutely vital link. The ferry is a vital link. And if anything, we need to enhance it, not reduce it, because we're not going to get what we hoped we were going to get back in the 1980s and 1990s. And that's the light rapid transit, which was the idea of a tram running from Fareham down Gosport through what used to be called the base case route, i.e. the old railway line, and then in a cut and cover tunnel under the harbour to Portsmouth. That was knocked on the head in 2004 when the government of the day decided that dropping a 1 kilometre concrete tube into a trench in the harbour would not work because of the ships that are actually pictured behind you right now.
Yeah.
The aircraft
carriers.
Because the two aircraft carriers' keel was such that tunnel needed to be dug deeper. It added £100 million to the light rapid transit scheme budget costs at the time, and it became unviable and unaffordable and was scrapped. So as a result of that, we have to rely on our ferry. What we really wanted, and what we've tried to do through various guises, is to have a water bus system around the harbour so that people can catch the ferry at more than one place and arrive at more than one destination. So whether that would be, say, for example, Port Solent, or whether it would be at Priddy's Hard or Royal Clarence Yard or Gunwharf Quays, etc., there needs to be that we wanted the imagination of an entrepreneur to come in and run a commercial ferry operation to crisscross the harbour to take people from destinations, not just for work, but for leisure as well. And those opportunities are still there if somebody can come forward with the necessary financial muscle to make it work. But it is unfortunate that ferries don't receive any kind of public subsidy. Not that I'm a great fan of public subsidy per se, but it's just but what I'm saying is it's unfair competition.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the ferry has got a monopoly because I mean, trying to get a bus round to Portsmouth from here only costs an arm and a leg, but it takes forever.
It does have a
And
monopoly, absolutely. Absolutely.
which is great for the ferry company, and wholeheartedly support it. But from that point of view, is there no way that I don't know what they pay on tax towards the council, whether they're penalised that way at all.
Well, I don't know either, but I don't think they do, because they must pay something for the pontoon, because the pontoon on Gosport side is owned by Gosport Borough Council still, I think. Although I might be wrong about that. I better be careful what I say, because I might not be correct on that. We certainly used to own it. The issue as far as the harbour is concerned is another thing. I don't know if Gosport residents are very well aware of this, but the boundary for Portsmouth is just over your left and right shoulder. It's actually the low water mark, if you like, on the Gosport side. So the boundary between Portsmouth and Gosport is not down the centre of the harbour. It's actually along Gosport's waterfront. So you only need to go out just a few meters away from the Gosport shoreline on the harbour, and you're in Portsmouth. And also, and they're the planning authority, and they're the harbour authority, if you like. And the Queen's Harbour Master, of course, runs the harbour. So Gosport's jurisdiction ends there. So I don't think Gosport receive anything significant from the ferry company, and I don't necessarily think we should. But it is a vital link, and it is extremely important that we do everything we can to encourage it to thrive.
Absolutely. And from moving on, is if there was an entrepreneur that came along with the capital to be able to run a water taxi service around the harbour, I guess they would need both councils, Gosport and Portsmouth councils, to be able to sign it off, to be able to put their pontoons in, to be able to run that taxi service.
More than that, they would need the agreement and of the companies that own those areas, because the jetties and the waterfront at places like Royal Clarence Yard, Priddishard, Gunwharf Quays, Port Solent are not owned by the councils. They're owned. They're private. They're privately owned. So it would have to be a consortium.
Yeah.
And it's very, and I doubt it's going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately. But it would be nice if somebody came along with that sort of idea.
Yeah. So what else we got looking at? I saw another question came up here from Lana. I think, is that the one?
Okay. You must need them.
That's interesting.
Okay, yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah, I agree with. I can't disagree with that. I'm a bit old myself. That's the trouble with me. I'm an analog person in a digital world, as they say.
Another question.
I'm just reading the question now. Well, Lana, can I suggest? I think that is a really, really valid and interesting point. Can I suggest you, if you do pop into the Tourist Information Office at some stage, and find out what they're doing as an organisation to digitise their business, and how they, because I know that they have pages on Facebook, and I know they have pages on Twitter and so on.
Yeah.
I do know that all of these organisations do use social media. I'm absolutely the last person to ask about social media, but it is a very crowded platform, and there was an awful lot of people broadcasting on it. And I do agree that that is true. What Lana has said is absolutely true. But the question is, how does it stand out? How does it get that message across? There are ways and means of them be able to do that. Lana, if you've got some ideas, and I think you obviously have, why not go into the Tourist Information Office and speak to the people who run it and just quiz them on that? Ask them about the way in which they use social media, how they interact with people who otherwise would not be, as you say, simply just walking in off the street and using their shops and picking up paper maps and so on. I think these are very, very valid point.
I don't know what the Hive footprint is in this area. For military families, the Hive used to be the one-stop shop to get all the information on a local area where you're moving to. I don't know whether they still do that. Certainly,
no idea. I think they call it Google these days, don't they?
Well, I mean, the Hive is specifically for military to find out information on the area that they're being posted into.
Right. No idea. London, no idea. Not being a military person myself. No, I don't know.
Well, so I could throw the light on that. When I was a welfare officer in London, we worked with the Hive quite a bit, and I actually worked on a product for them, which was the Hive booklet that they look to the local areas welfare officers to provide lots of information about the area, where the housing is, etc., and local facilities. So, Lana, if you're in the military community in this area, if you go onto the Hive pages, I think now on Facebook, you'll find out lots and lots of information that's given to new families coming to the area. So there you go. So I'd just like to put another shout out for people out there, if they can click the like button, just to let us know that you're there watching and listening, and hopefully we get a few more people putting some comments in the chat box. That'd be brilliant. Right, moving on then. How much time we got left? Oh, we haven't got long left. We've got about 20 minutes or so left. So what else we got to talk about? We have we've done the regeneration, heritage, climate.
Well, we do have quite a few leisure facilities in Gosport, and one of the things that we are in charge of are our leisure facilities. So now we have 2 splash parks, one at Lee, one at Stokes Bay. We also have the Alva Valley is now opening up more and more. The new cafe facility has opened at the Alva Valley, and on top of that, just last week or the week before last, I think if I get the dates right, the new garden centre opened in Grange, and the council worked very hard on ensuring that the land was available to make that work. And these are very important things for people. These are important opportunities for people of all ages, but especially for young people, to be able to get out and about and actually enjoy themselves. I mean, young families go to the splash parks, incredibly popular down on the summertime. We do try our best as a local authority to provide those kinds of facilities, whether they're affordable at cheap rates or whether they're free, for the residents in the borough. And we would really appreciate any feedback that we get from people about the quality of our leisure services. Okay, right. I'll take that on board. Yeah.
Yeah. So moving away from the area.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that the first thing I do, I mean, just to say, the first thing I do if I'm going anywhere as a tourist or whatever, is as I go onto some of the more trusted sites like your TripAdvisors and Trustpilots and so on to find out about places, and there is a heck of a lot of information out there. Local council, actually, Gosport Borough Council's website is also pretty good, because if it doesn't have the information that people are after in terms of what's available, we have links to them on the website. We've worked very hard, actually, in recent years, just before the pandemic, to upgrade our website as an authority. And I know that websites are don't have the immediacy of social media. I understand that, and it's not that we don't use social media on the council. We do, but the website's an extremely valuable source of information. And as I say, it can signpost you to just about anywhere you want to go, and within the borough. So if people are unsure about what there is available, what's on, what's open, how much it costs, where you need to get tickets if you need to get tickets, and so on, I would recommend Gosport Borough Council's website as a pretty decent starting point.
And just a quick one for Lana there. If you are moving up to Scotland, have a word with the welfare office up there. Have a look on the Hive pages. They will give you a huge amount of information on the local area, on the quarters that are available. Once you've been allocated a quarter, you can, I believe you can actually see it online, or you used to be able to. That's a really good spot for the information, and I'm sure that they've got a welfare officer out there that will deal with it for you. All right, I'm not moving away. I'm always here.
Yes, that's right. I think Lana Estelle said something about if you were coming from Scotland, I think was the point she made, rather than. Yeah, there we are. I think she is right. I think Lana Estelle said that it was she was putting herself in a position of someone who might be a long way away and was coming to Gosport. Yeah.
But I'm sure the welfare office in at Salton or across in the dockyard would have all that information when they apply for their quarters and etc. down here, because we've still got a large quarter patch, I believe, in Gosport for military personnel.
Well, the military still play an enormous role here. Salton it was we thought at one point going to move lock, stock and barrel to South Wales, but fortunately the decision was changed, and I think our MP had a lot to do with that, and it was going to go to St Athan, I think it was.
Yeah, St Athens, yeah. But they put the SFSG in there, which is the Special Forces Support Group.
Yeah,
which was lucky for us because we've kept it. I mean, they were talking about closing when they closed Daedalus. They moved all the engineering into Salton, and they were looking at Collingwood as well, but they seem to have hung on to that as well.
I think there's no imminent danger to Salton. Salton has been told that we've been told that Salton will not be surplus till at least 2029. The question of married quarters has come up there from Lana Estelle, and that's not something I, as a local council, I can say very much about. That really is very much a central government thing, and whilst I do sympathise with Lana Estelle over the quality of married quarters, it's not a local authority matter, and I'm not really qualified to be able to give an answer on that.
I am qualified.
Good for you.
Having been a welfare officer in London for 8 years, the married quarters are maintained under, I'm not sure who's got the contract at the moment, but it used to be Carillion Amy. And there was lots and lots of problems, and unfortunately it comes down to money as well, and that comes out of the MOD budget for housing, and unfortunately it's firefighting all the time with married quarters rather than they do put some capital in occasionally. Oh, Vivo, there you go. That's who's taken it over. So you see their vans about, and they I guess, I mean, were the lowest bidder, dare I say that, a rough guess, to take over the contract to look after the MOD housing, and they firefight. They just go around and do what they have to keep the stock habitable, and because it's under investment for decades, it's if you think quarters are bad, have a look at some of the accommodation that blokes live in. It's in a hell of a state. But that's military barracks for you, unfortunately. That's the MOD budget. Sorry, Lana, on that one. You're under the military. So, another one. Okay. Yeah, see how they go on. I mean, quite often than not, it's when these contracts swap hands, it's the same blokes doing the job, just a different T-shirt, unfortunately, and that you'll see a lot. But there you go. That's what that commercial side of subbing out the military does. And when they got rid of the estate wardens, the military estate wardens, there used to be a sergeant major generally goes around checking up on that. When they left, it come down to civilian contractors, and the military's gone subcontracted a long way, unfortunately. But there you go. These things are set to try us. So going forward then, next week, the election's coming up. It's going to be an interesting time. So I did really want to stay off of this subject, but do you think, as a local councillor, what's going on in Parliament, in the government at the moment, will have an impact? Do you think the local, from what you're seeing of canvassing, do you think local people will send a message, or will they vote on local issues rather than what's going on in government?
Well, any election, Tim, people vote on any number of issues. You'd be amazed, really, what sort of issues that people will vote on, or reasons that they will vote for somebody. I mean, I was canvassing with my colleague the other day. I mean, quite literally 2 days ago, and she knocked a door and met somebody who she used to play netball with at school. And so she's going to vote for her because she played netball with her at school. So you can't actually, I'm afraid, legislate for how people are going to vote. But you're right, I think, in your original premise. Almost inevitably, and it's always true, the national scene at the time plays a part and plays a role in how people cast their vote in local elections. Obviously, anyone who's standing as I am, as a local candidate in a local election, would prefer people to vote for the reasons that they think are important locally. And if they think that I've got I'm saying the kinds of things they want, to share the kind of vision that I've got for the borough, then I'd like people to consider voting for me. But on the other hand, if they look at what the other candidates are offering against me, and they think that they're offering something which they believe is a vision which is more in line with theirs, then they should vote for them for that reason. But unfortunately, it isn't necessarily that nuanced and that straightforward. I'm afraid, unfortunately, people do vote for a variety of reasons, and whatever the government of the day are doing, or even nationally or internationally, will play a part.
Yeah,
inevitably.
I mean, I keep up with a bit of politics a lot of the time. Gesundheit.
Thank you. Sorry.
And just watching PMQs week after week, it's so frustrating watching the performance, and they keep going on about it's not irrelevant, Partygate. It's annoying that they were doing it and everybody else was locked down, but let's get over it. Let's concentrate on some of the bigger issues that are going on. I mean, we're on the verge of a third world war, and I don't think people realise how close we are. And particularly, I don't think Keir Starmer is a particularly good leader. He's fairly ineffective in PMQs. You see him at PMQs, and he's had some golden opportunities to absolutely destroy Boris Johnson, and he just hasn't taken them. I mean, Ian Blackford, I mean, you can predict what he's going to say with his two questions, and one of them is going to call for Boris's resignation. So it's a wasted. He's just wasting his breath and spouting off for the sake of spouting off, unfortunately. But without an effective opposition to hold to the government, and the same with councils, without an effective opposition holding them to account, I think it has a detrimental effect to the way that things are run.
Well, you said earlier on, Tim, that you invited representatives from all the political parties to participate this evening.
Every single one of them.
And unfortunately, only one political party did decide. Okay, I've been here holding fort for most of the time, but we were joined by three others, and they were all of the same political party to me. And that's a shame, because I think it's a shame. Even though, of course, it might sound like it serves my purpose to have a monopoly on the discussion. I've tried to steer clear of party politics in this 2-hour discussion, because I think that demeans the discussion. I don't think that's what people want to hear. They want to be a little bit more positive about the town in which they live, and they want to know what the council is going to do for them, rather than me start talking about things which are banging a party political drum. So I haven't done that. I've avoided that, and I'm going to avoid it now. I'm not going to get involved in issues which are above my pay grade. I have absolutely nothing to do with what goes on in Westminster. I have nothing to do with what goes on in Downing Street, nothing whatsoever. And the only thing I can say, although it sounds a bit shallow, is that whatever people vote in the local elections across the country on Thursday next week will have absolutely and completely no impact on what happens, in my opinion, in Westminster, save for the possibility, of course, that if they believe it, that it may influence one political party or another to react in a particular way because they've done better or worse than they anticipated that they might. We've got grown-up things to do locally. We've got services to run on really tight budgets. We've got the responsibility. Those of us who are councillors at this moment in time have the responsibility to deliver for the residents we represent. That's it. That's all we've got. We do have a vested interest in lobbying government to get the best deal we possibly can for our communities. And that's true of all councillors of all political persuasions all over the country. However, how we deliver is what we're judged on, and whether we deliver on what we say we're going to do is what we're judged on. We're trying to put forward our manifesto to people to say, look, this is what we've done, this is what we intend to do, and we'd like you to support us. But roughly this time next week, as it happens, we are now about 9 p.m. The polls will close in 1 week and 1 hour time. And at that point, I may not be a councillor on Gosport Borough Council anymore. And the responsibility for that work will pass to somebody else. And if it does pass to somebody else, then it's up to that person then to take that, to pick up the baton and run with it and do what they can for the community that they represent. And that's basically how it goes. I'd actually like to end on a fairly upbeat, positive note, and that's something that might surprise people if they're still watching the podcast here, and that is there is actually quite a reasonable amount of conviviality and almost friendship, if you like, between political parties in local government, probably true in central government to an extent as well. And it is and just remember and believe it's quite possible to have friends in politics who are not in your political party, and it's quite possible to have enemies within your political party. So it's actually not impossible to across the political divide to get on with people, and for people of different political persuasions and different political parties to see the way they should money should be spent and the priorities and so on differently, but nevertheless to come together, to work together, to make things happen, because we all at the end of the day we all should be rowing in the same direction.
Absolutely. Well, Stephen, it's been an absolute pleasure.
I'm sorry it was only me in the end. I apologise to everyone listening. Actually, I am sorry about that.
Well, I can thank you, and I can just like to thank your colleagues as well for joining in the conversation, for giving the information out as you see it. I set out for this program to not be a party political broadcast in any way, shape, or form, but just to inform local residents to ask their questions that they wanted to ask sort of sitting councillors at the present moment in time. So from that point of view, I'd just like to thank you and your colleagues for turning up.
Okay, thanks for that, and thanks for the people who asked questions. Appreciated it. Thank you.
So if you'd just like to hang about till after the show, we'll have another quick chat.
Will do.
So, well, there you have it. Thanks for all your comments. Thanks for clicking the like button and sharing it with your friends. I think it's been a success this evening. I've enjoyed it. I think we've answered a lot of questions. We've covered an awful lot of ground. We've got some insight into what has been going on in Gosport and over the years, the plans that the current government or the current council have for the area going forward. So in the meantime, next week I've got another bit of a special. I'm looking at doing a bit of a crime special. I've got a couple of special guests coming on next week. I've got a forensic psychologist whose job it was to see whether people are sane enough to stand trial. Hopefully I've got an ex-firearms officer from the Met and a few other guests going to come on. The following week, the 12th of May, I'm hoping to do another post-election special where I'm going to invite on those successful candidates that are new to the council and maybe one or two others that have been re-elected to come back and have a chat. So if you like what I do, join in the conversation. Click the like button, post comments in the chat box. It's important that we move forward together. Gosport is a fantastic place to live in the world. I don't really want to go and live anywhere else. I'm really content living down here. It has its challenges getting on and off the peninsula on occasion, but I think the current council have the right idea of looking at getting the right redevelopment for the area. Hopefully we can attract new businesses in that will employ local people, and that's important to keep the locals in work on the peninsula, so we keep the transport links sort of free at key times. But for now, all I can do is say thank you very much for joining in the conversation. Thank you very much for for being there, and let's go out on a high. So thank you very much.